I installed security cameras around my house after a break-in. Motion activated. Recording 24/7. Stored in the cloud. Last week I was reviewing footage from the past month, fast-forwarding through days of nothing. Then I saw something that made me stop. My wife, coming home at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'd been asleep, thought she was in bed next to me, but the footage showed her arriving, parking, walking to the door. I checked other nights. She'd been leaving after I fell asleep and coming back before I woke up. For months, I had no idea where she'd been going, what she'd been doing. Then I found footage from inside the house, from the camera in our bedroom. What I saw explained everything and destroyed everything. The break-in happened in October. Someone had come through our back door while my wife Patricia and I were at the grocery store. We'd been gone maybe an hour. When we came home, the door was open. Someone had been inside, taken some cash from a drawer, some of Patricia's jewelry, my laptop, nothing irreplaceable but enough to make us feel violated, make us feel unsafe in our own home. The police came, took a report, said there'd been several break-ins in the neighborhood recently, probably the same person. They'd increased patrols but recommended we get a security system, something to deter future attempts, something to catch the person if they came back. I researched systems, talked to neighbors who had them, decided on a comprehensive setup, cameras outside covering all entrances, motion-activated lights, camera in the living room and kitchen for interior monitoring. The installation company recommended a bedroom camera too. I hesitated. That felt invasive. But Patricia said we should be thorough, that if someone broke in while we were sleeping, we'd want footage. So I agreed. The system was installed in early November, connected to Wi-Fi, uploaded footage to cloud storage. I could check it from my phone anytime, see live feeds, review recorded footage. The app made it easy, probably too easy. I found myself checking it constantly at first, watching for suspicious activity, making sure our house was secure. After a few weeks, I stopped checking as often. Nothing ever happened, just footage of us coming and going, the mailman, neighbors walking dogs, squirrels setting off motion sensors, normal suburban life, boring, safe, exactly what we wanted. Then, last week, I was checking footage from a month earlier, January. I'd been going through it because our homeowner's insurance wanted documentation of when we'd had some work done on the roof. They needed proof of the date for their records. So I was fast-forwarding through days of footage, looking for the roofing truck, the workers, evidence of when the repairs happened. I was skipping through the overnight hours. Nothing ever happened then, just stationary footage of our driveway, our front door, sometimes a car driving past, occasionally a cat or raccoon triggering the motion sensor. Nothing interesting. Then I saw movement. The timestamp said 3:17 a.m., Tuesday, January 16th. I slowed the playback, watched closely. A car pulled into our driveway. Patricia's car. The driver's door opened. Patricia got out. She walked to the front door, used her key, went inside. The footage continued, but there was no more movement outside. I sat, staring at my phone. That didn't make sense. Patricia hadn't been out that night. She'd been in bed next to me. I'd gone to sleep around 11. She'd been there. I'd woken up around 7. She'd still been there. I remembered specifically because she'd gotten up before me that morning, made coffee, been in the kitchen when I came downstairs, but the footage was clear. Patricia arriving home at 3:17 a.m., which meant she'd left at some point after I fell asleep, been somewhere, come back, and I'd never known. I checked the interior camera footage from that night. The living room camera showed Patricia walking through at 11:15 p.m., going upstairs, normal bedtime routine, then nothing until 1:47 a.m., Patricia coming back downstairs, fully dressed, jacket on. She went to the front door, left. The camera showed an empty room for the next hour and a half. Then, at 3:19 a.m., Patricia returned, took off her jacket, went back upstairs. 2 minutes later, the bedroom showed her getting into bed, next to me sleeping, completely unaware. I felt cold. Patricia had been leaving the house in the middle of the night, while I slept, going somewhere for over an hour, coming back, getting back into bed like nothing had happened, and I'd had no idea. I checked other nights, started going through footage systematically. January 15th, Patricia left at 2:03 a.m., returned at 3:41 a.m. January 14th, left at 1:28 a.m., returned at 3:15 a.m. every single night. Sometimes she left earlier, sometimes later, but every night Patricia was leaving our house while I slept. Had been for weeks, probably longer. I went back further. December, November, October, right after the security system was installed. Every night. Same pattern. Patricia leaving between midnight and 2 a.m., returning between 2 and 4 a.m., gone for an hour, sometimes 2, every single night for months. How had I not noticed? How had I slept through her leaving and returning every night? How had I never woken up to find her gone? We'd been married for 43 years, slept in the same bed for decades. How could I not know my wife was leaving every night? But I was 68 years old. I slept heavily, always had. Once I was asleep, I rarely woke until morning. Patricia knew this. She'd commented on it over the years, said she could vacuum next to the bed and I wouldn't wake up. I'd thought it was a good thing, meant I got good rest. Now I realized it meant I'd been completely unaware of what Patricia was doing. I kept watching footage, trying to understand. The cameras showed Patricia leaving, showed her returning, but didn't show where she went, what she did during those hours, who she was with, why she was doing this every single night. I thought about confronting her immediately, asking her directly, but something stopped me. Some instinct that I needed to understand more before I accused her, needed to have evidence, needed to know what I was dealing with. I checked the bedroom camera footage more carefully. The camera was positioned to show the door and most of the room, security measure in case someone broke in. But it also showed our bed, showed us sleeping, showed Patricia getting up each night. I watched the footage from last night. I'd gone to bed at 10:30 p.m., read for 30 minutes, turned off my light at 11. Patricia had still been downstairs. She came up at 11:45 p.m., got ready for bed, laid down next to me. At 12:52 a.m., she got up, quietly, carefully. She dressed in the dark, jeans, sweater, jacket. She watched me for a moment, making sure I was still asleep. Then she left the room. The exterior camera showed her getting in her car at 12:56 a.m., driving away. She returned at 2:33 a.m. The interior camera showed her coming back inside, taking off her jacket, going upstairs. The bedroom camera showed her undressing, getting back into bed. She laid there for a moment, just breathing. Then she settled in and appeared to fall asleep. At 7:15 a.m., her alarm went off. She got up, started her day like nothing had happened. I'd woken at 7:30 a.m., come downstairs. Patricia had been making breakfast, cheerful, normal, asked about my plans for the day, told me about errands she needed to run. Completely ordinary morning conversation. No hint that she'd been out of the house in the middle of the night. No indication anything was different. I watched this happen night after night in the footage. Patricia leaving, Patricia returning, Patricia acting completely normal the next day. Me completely oblivious. It had been going on for months, probably longer than the cameras had been recording. The security system had only captured the most recent evidence. Patricia had probably been doing this for much longer. Where was she going? That was the question consuming me. What was important enough to leave the house every single night? What required these secret trips while I slept? Who was she meeting? What was she doing? The obvious answer was an affair. That's what anyone would think. Wife sneaking out at night, coming back hours later. Clearly she was seeing someone, meeting them while her husband slept, carrying on a relationship he knew nothing about. But something about that didn't fit. Patricia was 70 years old. We'd been married since 1981, 43 years together. We'd had a good marriage, or I'd thought we had. We were affectionate, still intimate occasionally, still enjoyed each other's company. We traveled together, spent time with our kids and grandkids, had friends we socialized with. Everything seemed normal, happy even. Would she really be having an affair at 70, after all these years? And if she was, why every single night? Affairs were usually occasional, stolen moments here and there, not regular nightly commitments, not something you did 7 nights a week for months. I needed to know where she was going, needed to see what she was doing during those hours. The cameras only showed her leaving and returning, didn't show her destination. I considered following her, waiting until she left, getting in my car, tracking where she went. But if she noticed me following her, it would destroy any chance of understanding the truth. She'd know I was suspicious. She'd have time to prepare explanations, lies. I needed to catch her in the truth, not give her warning. Instead, I checked her car. Patricia drove a Honda CR-V, 7 years old. Reliable. She used it for errands, shopping, visiting friends, normal activities. I went out to the garage while Patricia was showering, looked through her car for evidence, something that might tell me where she'd been going. The car was clean. Patricia kept it neat. No trash, no clutter, just a normal vehicle. I checked the console. Registration, insurance papers, nothing unusual. I checked under the seats, found a receipt from a gas station, 3 weeks old, from a station across town. Not one Patricia normally used. Why had she been over there? I checked the GPS history. Patricia's car had built-in navigation. It stored recent destinations. I scrolled through the list. Most were familiar. Grocery store, doctor's office, our daughter's house, places I expected. But there was one address that appeared repeatedly, almost every day. An address I didn't recognize. Residential Street on the west side of Columbus. I wrote it down. That night, I pretended everything was normal. Had dinner with Patricia, watched television, went to bed at my usual time. Patricia came up at 11:30, got ready for bed, laid down next to me. I pretended to sleep, kept my breathing deep and regular, stayed still. At 12:47 a.m., Patricia got up. I kept my eyes closed, maintained my sleeping act. I heard her dressing, heard her leave the room, heard her go downstairs, heard the front door open and close, heard her car start. I waited 5 minutes. Then I got up. I dressed quickly, got in my own car, drove to the address from the GPS. It took 20 minutes. Quiet residential neighborhood, older houses, well-maintained. I drove slowly, looking for Patricia's car, found it parked in front of a gray ranch house. Lights were on inside, Patricia's car in the driveway. I parked down the street, far enough to not be obvious, close enough to see, waited, watched. At 2:15 a.m., the front door of the house opened. Patricia came out. She stood on the porch for a moment, talking to someone inside. I couldn't see who. Then she walked to her car, got in, drove away. I waited until she was gone. Then I drove past the house slowly, tried to see inside. The lights were still on. I could see movement, someone inside, but I couldn't see who, couldn't see details, just knew. Patricia had spent 2 hours in that house. With someone I didn't know, I went home, got back into bed before Patricia arrived, pretended to still be asleep when she came in at 2:41 a.m. She undressed quietly, got back into bed, settled in. I laid there in the dark next to her, feeling like I was sleeping next to a stranger. The next morning, everything was normal again. Patricia made coffee, asked about my plans, mentioned she had errands, book club that afternoon, dinner with our daughter next week. Ordinary conversation, ordinary day, like she hadn't spent the middle of the night at a strange house across town. I spent that day investigating. I looked up the address online. Property records showed it was owned by someone named Robert Mitchell, purchased in 1998. I didn't know anyone named Robert Mitchell. Patricia had never mentioned that name. I searched for Robert Mitchell in Columbus, found several, couldn't tell which one owned the house. I went through Patricia's things while she was at book club. Her desk, her closet, her dresser, looking for evidence, letters, photos, something that would explain. I found bills, correspondence with friends, normal life documentation. Nothing about Robert Mitchell, nothing about the gray house, nothing that explained her nightly trips. I checked our bank accounts, looking for unusual transactions, money going somewhere I didn't know about, but everything looked normal. Grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, normal spending, nothing suspicious. No large withdrawals, no transfers I couldn't explain. I checked her phone records, our shared cell phone account, looked at who she'd been calling, mostly me, our daughters, her friends, numbers I recognized, but there was one number that appeared frequently, several times a week, short calls, usually during the day. I didn't recognize the number. I called it from my phone. It rang 4 times, went to voicemail, a man's voice. Professional. You've reached Robert Mitchell. Please leave a message. I hung up. Robert Mitchell, the man who owned the house, the man Patricia was visiting every night, the man she was calling regularly during the day, the man I knew nothing about. I confronted Patricia that evening. Couldn't wait anymore. Couldn't pretend I didn't know. Couldn't keep acting normal while my wife was clearly living some kind of secret life. I needed answers. We were in the kitchen. Patricia was making dinner. I said I needed to talk to her about something serious. She turned off the stove, looked at me with concern, asked what was wrong. I told her I knew she'd been leaving the house every night, that I'd seen the security footage, that I'd followed her, that I knew about the house on the west side, about Robert Mitchell, that I needed her to explain what was going on. Patricia's face went white. She sat down at the kitchen table, put her head in her hands, didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she started crying, not gentle tears, deep, wrenching sobs, like something inside her was breaking. I stood there watching my wife fall apart, not knowing what to do, not knowing what this meant. Was it guilt? Was she caught in an affair? Was Robert Mitchell her lover? Was our marriage a lie? Finally, Patricia looked up. Her face was red, eyes swollen. She said we needed to talk, that I deserved the truth, that she should have told me a long time ago, that she'd been trying to protect me but had been wrong, that everything was more complicated than I knew. She asked me to sit down. I did. Patricia took a deep breath. Then she told me something I never expected. She said Robert Mitchell was her husband, her first husband, the man she'd married before me, the man she'd told me had died in 1979. Except he hadn't died. He was alive, living in that house, suffering from advanced Alzheimer's disease, and Patricia had been taking care of him every night for the past 3 years. I couldn't process what she was saying. Patricia's first husband? She'd been married before me? She'd told me she'd been engaged once in her 20s, that it hadn't worked out, that she'd married me at 27, that I was her first and only husband. That's what I'd believed for 43 years. Patricia said she was sorry, that she'd lied, that she'd been married to Robert from 1975 to 1979, 4 years. They'd married young. She was 21, he was 23. They'd been happy at first. Then Robert started having problems, mental health issues, depression, eventually diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia. By 1979, their marriage had fallen apart. Robert couldn't work, couldn't function. Patricia was 25 years old trying to care for a severely mentally ill husband. It was destroying her. Patricia said she'd filed for divorce in 1979. Robert had been hospitalized at the time, psychiatric facility. He'd signed the papers, or she'd thought he had. She'd submitted everything to the court, waited for the divorce to be finalized, but there had been a problem with the paperwork, some filing error. The divorce had never been legally processed. She hadn't found out until years later. By then, she'd already met me. We'd started dating in 1980, gotten married in 1981. Patricia said she'd believed she was divorced, had thought the marriage to Robert was over, legally ended. She hadn't been trying to deceive me. She'd genuinely thought she was free to remarry. But in 1984, she'd gotten a call from a hospital. Robert had been admitted. Emergency contact information still listed her as his wife. The hospital needed her to make medical decisions. That's when Patricia found out the divorce had never been finalized. She was still legally married to Robert, which meant her marriage to me wasn't legal. We weren't actually married. We'd been living as husband and wife, had 2 children together, but legally she was married to someone else. I sat there trying to understand. Patricia was saying our entire marriage was invalid, that she was technically a bigamist, that for 43 years she'd been legally married to Robert Mitchell while living as my wife, that everything I'd believed about our relationship was built on a legal impossibility. Patricia said she'd tried to fix it, had contacted lawyers, had attempted to finalize the divorce from Robert, but Robert's mental condition made it complicated. He couldn't give informed consent, couldn't participate in legal proceedings. The process would take years, would require court hearings, would expose everything, would mean admitting our marriage wasn't legal, would affect our children's legitimacy. Patricia had panicked, had decided to just keep quiet, to live with the situation, to hope it never came up. She said Robert had been in and out of institutions for years, state hospitals, care facilities. She'd maintained minimal contact, enough to handle emergencies, but she'd kept him separate from our life. Never told me, never told our children, kept Robert as a secret part of her past that she hoped would just fade away. Then, 3 years ago, Robert had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease on top of his schizophrenia, early onset, aggressive. By 2021, he needed full-time care. The state facility wanted to move him to a memory care unit, but the costs were astronomical. Robert had no money, no family except Patricia. As his legal wife, she was responsible. Patricia said she couldn't let him go into a terrible facility, couldn't let him suffer alone. Despite everything, despite the failed marriage and the decades apart, he'd been someone she loved once, someone who'd gotten sick through no fault of his own, someone who deserved care. So she'd used her own money to rent him a small house, hired daytime caregivers, and taken over the night shifts herself. For 3 years, Patricia had been going to Robert's house every night, spending 2 or 3 hours there, making sure he was okay, helping with his needs, sitting with him. He didn't remember her, didn't know who she was. The Alzheimer's had taken everything, but she kept going anyway, kept taking care of him, kept it secret from me, from our children, from everyone. I sat listening to all this feeling like my entire life was unraveling. My wife wasn't actually my wife. She'd been married to someone else our entire relationship. She'd been spending every night for 3 years caring for a man I'd never heard of, a man she'd lied about, a man whose existence meant everything I thought I knew was wrong. I asked Patricia why. Why hadn't she told me? Why keep this secret for 40 years? Why not explain about Robert when she first found out the divorce wasn't final? Why not let me help her fix it? We could have handled it together, could have properly divorced Robert, could have legally married, could have made everything right. Patricia cried harder, said she'd been scared. Scared I'd leave her if I knew she was still married to someone else. Scared of what people would think. Scared of the legal complications. Scared of what it would mean for our children. She'd made a choice when she was 30 years old. A choice to hide the truth. And then she'd been trapped by that choice. The longer she kept the secret, the harder it was to reveal. Years turned into decades. And she'd never found the right time, the right way, so she just kept lying. I asked about the money. Patricia said she'd been using her own savings, money she'd inherited from her mother, money she'd earned from part-time work over the years. She'd been paying for Robert's house, his caregivers, his medications, his medical bills, everything. It was draining her finances, but she couldn't stop, couldn't abandon him. I asked if she'd tried to get Robert's family involved. Patricia said Robert's parents were dead. He had a sister, but they hadn't spoken in 30 years. She'd tried to contact her when Robert got sick. The sister wanted nothing to do with him, said he was Patricia's responsibility. She'd made her choice when she married him. Now she had to live with it. I didn't know what to say, what to feel. My wife had been lying to me for our entire marriage. Everything we'd built was based on a legal fiction. We weren't actually married. Our children were born to a woman who was legally married to another man. Every anniversary we'd celebrated was meaningless, because we'd never actually been husband and wife. But also, Patricia had been caring for a sick person who had no one else, had been sacrificing her sleep and her money and her peace of mind to help someone who couldn't help himself. That was compassionate, noble even. She'd been doing something good while hiding it behind terrible lies. I told Patricia I needed time to think, needed to process all of this. She nodded, said she understood, that she'd answer any questions I had, that she'd do whatever I wanted, get the divorce from Robert finalized, make our marriage legal, stop going to his house, whatever I needed. She just wanted a chance to make things right. That was a week ago. Since then, I've been trying to figure out what to do, what to think, how to feel about any of this. Patricia hasn't gone to Robert's house since our conversation. She's hired overnight caregivers to cover the shifts she used to work. She's started divorce proceedings. Finally, after 43 years of being legally married to Robert Mitchell, she's filing to end it. Our daughters know now. Patricia told them, explained everything. They're shocked, confused, struggling to understand how their mother could have kept this secret for so long, struggling with the fact that their parents were never legally married, that their entire family history is more complicated than they knew. Sarah, our oldest, is angry, says Patricia lied to all of us, that she built our family on deception, that we can't trust anything she says now, that who knows what else she's been hiding. Sarah wants Patricia to have nothing to do with Robert anymore, says Patricia needs to choose between her legal husband and her actual family, that she can't keep trying to serve both. Jennifer, our younger daughter, is more sympathetic, says Patricia was in an impossible situation, that she made mistakes but was trying to do the right thing. That caring for Robert shows she's a good person, even if she handled everything wrong. Jennifer thinks we should support Patricia through finalizing the divorce, help her transition Robert to other care, move forward as a family. I'm somewhere in between. I understand why Patricia kept the secret initially. Finding out the divorce wasn't finalized must have been terrifying. She was young, scared, made a bad choice. But 43 years? 43 years of lying? Of maintaining this elaborate deception? Of being married to one man while living with another? That's harder to forgive. And the practical issues. Our marriage isn't legal. Never has been. We'll need to actually get married. File paperwork. Make it official. After 43 years of thinking we were married, we'll have to go through the process like newlyweds. It feels absurd. It feels like everything we've built is being retroactively invalidated. The financial issues, too. Patricia has spent probably hundreds of thousands of dollars on Robert's care over the years. Money she could have contributed to our household, to our retirement, to our children's education. Instead, it went to caring for a man I didn't know existed, a man who was her legal husband while I wasn't. And the security footage. I keep thinking about those months of recordings. Patricia leaving every night. Me sleeping, completely unaware. If I hadn't installed those cameras, I'd still not know. Patricia would still be keeping this secret, still leaving every night, still maintaining this double life. The break-in that prompted the security system turned out to be a blessing. Revealed a truth I needed to know, even though learning it has been devastating. I went to Robert's house yesterday. Patricia gave me the address, said I could visit if I wanted, meet the man who's been her legal husband for nearly 50 years, the man who's shaped so much of our life without me knowing he existed. The house was small, neat. A daytime caregiver was there, professional woman in her 40s. She let me in, showed me around. It was set up for someone with advanced dementia, safety features, grab bars, clear pathways, everything organized to minimize confusion. Robert was in the living room, sitting in a recliner, watching television, or not watching, just sitting there. He looked old, 73 according to Patricia, but looked older. The disease had aged him, made him fragile. He stared at the television with empty eyes, not really seeing, just existing. The caregiver introduced me, said there was a visitor. Robert looked at me, no recognition, no understanding, just a blank stare. The caregiver said he didn't recognize anyone anymore. Not Patricia, not the caregivers, not himself in the mirror. The Alzheimer's had taken everything. He was just a body now, going through motions, existing but not really living. I sat with him for 30 minutes, didn't say much, just sat, watched him, tried to understand who this person was, why Patricia had felt obligated to care for him, why she'd sacrificed so much for someone who didn't even know she existed anymore. I could see it though, could see why Patricia kept coming, why she couldn't just abandon him. He was helpless, completely dependent. Without Patricia's money and care, he'd be in some state facility, neglected, alone, dying slowly without anyone who cared. Patricia had given him dignity, comfort, as much quality of life as his condition allowed. That was love in a way, not romantic love, but human compassion, caring for someone who needed it even when it cost her everything. I left after 30 minutes, thanked the caregiver, drove home thinking about everything, about Patricia's choices, about the lies and the sacrifices, about what marriage means, what commitment means, what I wanted going forward. Patricia and I have been talking every day, long conversations, about our past, about what she did and why, about what I'm feeling, about what happens next. It's been painful, honest in ways we maybe haven't been in years. We're finally telling each other true things, even when they hurt, especially when they hurt. Patricia says she loves me, has always loved me, that Robert was her past, I've been her present and her future, that caring for him was obligation, duty, compassion for someone who'd gotten dealt a terrible hand in life, but it wasn't love, not the way she loves me, not the partnership we've built over 4 decades. I believe her, but I'm also hurt, betrayed, angry that she lied for so long, that she let me think things about our marriage that weren't true, that she made choices about our money and our time without telling me, that she essentially had 2 lives, one with me, one with Robert, and never thought I deserved to know. The divorce from Robert is moving forward. Patricia's lawyer says it should be finalized in 3 months. Robert can't consent, but the court can approve it based on his condition. Once it's done, Patricia will legally be single for the first time since 1975, 50 years. Then we can actually get married, make it legal, make it real in ways it apparently never was. Patricia wants to do it, wants to have a ceremony, make it official. She says we can do it quietly, just us and the girls, sign papers at the courthouse, or we can do something bigger, celebrate finally making legal what we've felt for 43 years. She's leaving it up to me. I don't know what I want. Part of me thinks yes. Let's make it official. Let's turn these 43 years of living together into actual marriage. Let's move forward knowing everything is finally honest, finally real, finally legal. But another part of me wonders if I can. Can I marry someone who lied to me for 4 decades? Can I commit to someone who kept something this enormous secret? Can I trust Patricia after learning she's capable of maintaining such an elaborate deception? Our daughters have opinions. Sarah thinks I should leave, says Patricia broke the marriage, that even though it wasn't legally valid, the commitment was real, and Patricia violated it, that spending every night with another man, even to care for him, was a betrayal, that I deserve someone who's honest, someone who chooses me completely, someone who doesn't have a secret husband tucked away across town. Jennifer thinks I should stay, says 43 years together means something, that Patricia made mistakes, but was trying to do right by everyone, that she was trapped by circumstances and early bad choices, that we love each other, that we've built a life together, that throwing it all away over something Patricia did out of compassion seems wrong. I'm meeting with a counselor next week, Patricia and I together. We need professional help to navigate this, to figure out if our relationship can survive this revelation, if trust can be rebuilt after such fundamental deception, if we can move forward or if the foundation is too damaged. The security footage sits in cloud storage, months of evidence of Patricia's nighttime trips. I've been deleting it. Don't need it anymore. Don't want to see those images of my wife leaving me sleeping, going to care for a man I didn't know about, coming home and pretending everything was normal. Those images hurt too much to keep, but I kept one clip the night I followed her, the footage of Patricia leaving at 12:47 a.m., knowing now where she was going, why she was going, what she was doing during those hours. It's evidence of her deception, but also of her compassion. Both things are true. Both things matter. I've been thinking about what marriage means. I'd always thought it was about honesty, complete transparency, sharing everything. But maybe it's more complicated. Maybe sometimes you keep things to yourself. Maybe sometimes you carry burdens alone because sharing them would hurt someone you love. Maybe Patricia was wrong to lie, but right to protect me from knowing about Robert. Right to let me think our marriage was simple and straightforward. Right to handle her obligation to her first husband without making it my burden too. Or maybe that's me making excuses. Maybe I'm trying to find a way to forgive what can't be forgiven. Maybe Patricia's lies were inexcusable, no matter how good her intentions. Maybe our marriage has been a fiction, and I'm only now seeing the truth. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm 68 years old. Been with Patricia since I was 25. She's been my partner for my entire adult life. We've raised children, built a home, created memories, supported each other through illness and loss and all the challenges life brings. That has to mean something, has to count for something, even if it was all built on a foundation I didn't know was there. Patricia's lawyer called yesterday. The divorce from Robert should be finalized by April, 2 months away. After that, we can legally marry. Patricia asked if I wanted to set a date. Maybe June, our original anniversary month. Make it official in the same season we've been celebrating for 43 years. I told her I'd think about it. Haven't given her an answer yet. Don't know what my answer is. Some days I want to marry her. Want to make everything legal and official and move forward. Other days I want to walk away. Want to start over without all this complexity, without all these lies, without the weight of knowing my entire marriage was legally invalid. Our daughters are planning to visit next week. Family meeting. We need to decide how to handle all this going forward. How to explain it to extended family, to friends, to people who've thought of us as married for 4 decades. Do we tell them the truth? Do we keep it quiet? Do we pretend everything's normal? Or do we acknowledge how strange and complicated this is? Sarah wants to tell everyone, says the lies need to stop, that Patricia's secret has poisoned our family, and we need full transparency to heal, that keeping more secrets would just be more deception. Jennifer wants to keep it quiet, says it's our private business, that what other people think doesn't matter, that we can handle this within our family without making it public, that exposing everything would just invite judgment without helping anything. Patricia will do whatever I want. She's said that repeatedly. Whatever I need, whatever I decide, she'll follow my lead. She knows she's destroyed trust, knows she needs to rebuild it, knows she doesn't get to make demands anymore. She's letting me decide how we move forward, if we move forward. The break-in that started all this was never solved. The person who came through our back door, who took our cash and jewelry and laptop, who prompted us to install security cameras. Police said the neighborhood break-in stopped in December. Whoever was doing it moved on, or got caught for something else, or just quit. We never found out who violated our home that day in October, but in a way, that person gave us something, forced us to install cameras that revealed a much bigger violation. A violation that had been happening for years, but that I'd never known about. If our house hadn't been broken into, I'd still be ignorant, still living in a marriage I thought was simple, still trusting Patricia completely, still unaware of Robert Mitchell and the secret life Patricia had been living. Is that better? Is ignorance easier than truth? Would I rather still not know? Part of me thinks yes. Life was simpler when I thought I knew everything, when I believed Patricia and I had been married for 43 years, when I trusted that what I saw was all there was. But another part of me knows the truth is better, even painful truth, even truth that destroys illusions, because at least now I'm dealing with reality, with what actually is, not with comfortable lies. I visited Robert's house again yesterday. Didn't tell Patricia I was going, just drove over during the day. The caregiver remembered me, let me in. Robert was in the same chair, same blank expression, Same empty stare at the television. I sat with him again, longer this time. An hour, watched him, tried to see the person he'd been before the diseases took him, before the schizophrenia and the Alzheimer's, when he was young and healthy, when Patricia loved him enough to marry him, when he had a future ahead of him. The caregiver told me about his routine. He wakes around 8, has breakfast, sits in his chair most of the day, watches television or stares at nothing, sometimes gets agitated, confused, scared. The caregiver redirects him, calms him down, helps him through the difficult moments. He goes to bed around 9, sleeps fitfully, often wakes during the night disoriented. That's when Patricia used to come, during the night hours when he was most confused, when he needed someone there even though he didn't know who they were. The caregiver said Patricia was good with him, patient, gentle. She'd sit with Robert for hours, talk to him even though he didn't respond, hold his hand, help him feel safe even though he couldn't understand why he felt unsafe. The caregiver said she'd never seen someone so dedicated to caring for a person who didn't even know them, that it was remarkable, that Patricia obviously loved him very much. I told the caregiver Patricia was Robert's wife, that she'd been married to him for almost 50 years, even though they'd lived apart for most of it. The caregiver looked surprised, said Patricia had never mentioned being married to Robert, had always referred to him as someone she used to know, someone she felt responsible for. The caregiver had assumed Patricia was a friend or maybe a distant relative, not a wife. That hurt, that even to the people caring for Robert, Patricia hadn't claimed the marriage, hadn't acknowledged the legal reality. She'd kept it hidden even there, even in the one place where it should have been relevant, where being his wife gave her medical authority and decision-making power. She'd minimized it, treated it as an obligation rather than a relationship. I asked the caregiver what would happen to Robert when Patricia's divorce was finalized, when she was no longer legally his wife, no longer legally responsible for his care. The caregiver said Patricia had already arranged it. She'd established a trust, put money aside, enough to cover Robert's care for as long as he lived. The house was paid for. The caregivers would continue. Robert's needs would be met. Patricia had made sure of that before stepping away, had made sure her obligation to him would be fulfilled even after she was no longer legally bound to him. That said something about Patricia's character. She could have just walked away, filed for divorce, let Robert become the state's responsibility, but she hadn't. She'd made sure he'd be taken care of, that the standard of care wouldn't drop, that he'd continue to live with dignity even though she wouldn't be there anymore. That took planning, sacrifice, a level of commitment most people wouldn't maintain to an ex-spouse they hadn't lived with in 43 years. I went home and told Patricia I'd visited Robert. She looked worried, asked why, what I'd been looking for, whether seeing him had made things worse or better. I told her honestly, I'd needed to see who she'd been protecting, who she'd been sacrificing for. I'd needed to understand what had driven her to keep this secret, to maintain this double life for so long. Patricia asked if I understood now. I told her I was starting to, that I could see Robert was helpless, that without her, his life would have been much harder, that her nightly trips had been acts of compassion even if they were built on deception, that what she'd done for him was good even if how she'd done it had been wrong. Patricia started crying again. She's been doing that a lot these past 2 weeks. Said she'd been so scared to tell me, so afraid I'd see her as a liar and a fraud, that I'd leave her, that everything we'd built would be destroyed. She said she'd convinced herself it was better to keep the secret, to protect me from knowing, to handle Robert on her own, that it had been a mistake, that she saw that now, that she should have trusted me with the truth. I asked her when she'd planned to tell me. If I hadn't found the security footage, if I'd never discovered her nightly trips, would she have ever revealed the truth about Robert? Patricia said she didn't know, that she'd thought about it constantly, that every time Robert declined, every time his condition worsened, she'd thought, maybe this is when I should tell Dennis. Maybe now that Robert's getting close to the end, I should explain everything. But she'd always lost her nerve, always found reasons to wait, always chose to keep the secret a little longer. Patricia said the only thing that might have forced her to tell the truth was Robert's death, that when he died, she'd have to handle the arrangements. The death certificate, the funeral, all the legal and practical matters of someone dying. She'd have to identify herself as his wife, as his next of kin. It would have all come out then, whether she wanted it to or not. The truth would have been unavoidable, so she'd been living in a strange kind of limbo, keeping the secret while knowing it couldn't last forever. knowing that someday, somehow, I'd find out, but hoping that day would come when Robert was dead, when the obligation was over, when she could explain it as something from the past rather than something ongoing. The security cameras had ruined that plan, had forced the revelation years before Robert's death, had exposed everything while Robert was still alive, while Patricia was still legally married to him, while the situation was active rather than historical. That made it harder to explain, harder to forgive, made it feel more like ongoing betrayal rather than past mistakes. I asked Patricia the question I'd been avoiding, whether she'd been intimate with Robert during these visits, whether taking care of him had included any kind of physical relationship, whether she'd been cheating on me in the traditional sense. Patricia looked horrified, said absolutely not, that Robert was incapable of that kind of relationship, that his diseases had taken everything, that caring for him had been purely caretaking, helping him eat, making sure he took medications, sitting with him through confused episodes, nothing romantic, nothing physical beyond basic care. She said Robert hadn't even known who she was, that he'd looked at her like a stranger every single night, that any kind of intimate relationship would have been impossible even if she'd wanted it, which she hadn't. I believed her. The footage showed Patricia arriving and leaving. The timing was consistent with what she was describing. 2 hours, sometimes 3, enough for caregiving, not enough for anything else. And Robert's condition made it clear he wasn't capable of the kind of relationship that would constitute an affair. But it was still a betrayal, not a sexual one, but a betrayal of honesty, of trust, of the agreement we'd made when we started our life together, that we'd be partners, that we'd share everything, that we'd face challenges together. Patricia had faced this challenge alone, had kept me separate from a huge part of her life, had maintained a relationship with another man, even a caregiving one, without my knowledge. That was betrayal, even if it wasn't infidelity. Our daughters came for dinner last night. First time we'd all been together since the revelation. It was awkward, tense. We all pretended things were normal for the first hour, talked about their jobs and their kids and mundane family matters. But eventually, we had to address the real situation, the reason they'd come. Sarah started, said she'd been thinking about everything, about Patricia's lies, about our invalid marriage, about what it all meant for our family. She said she understood why Patricia did what she did, could see the compassion in caring for Robert. But she also thought the lying was unforgivable, that building a family on deception had damaged all of us, that we'd all been living a fiction, that Sarah's entire understanding of her family history was wrong. Sarah said she'd looked into the legalities, had talked to a lawyer about what it meant that Patricia and I were never actually married. Apparently, in Ohio, we'd been in what's called a putative marriage. Both of us believed we were married. We'd acted as spouses. The state recognized certain legal rights even though the marriage wasn't technically valid. So our children were legitimate. Our property was appropriately shared. We weren't as legally vulnerable as it might seem. But Sarah said that didn't fix the emotional damage, that she'd grown up thinking her parents had a solid, honest marriage, that they were role models, that what Patricia and Dennis had was something to aspire to. Now she knew it had all been built on lies, that Patricia had been living a double life, that our family wasn't what she'd thought it was. That hurt, made her question everything about her childhood, everything about what she'd been taught about relationships and commitment and honesty. Jennifer pushed back, said Sarah was being too harsh, that Patricia had been in an impossible situation, that yes, she'd made mistakes, but she'd also been doing something generous, something most people wouldn't do, taking care of someone who had no one else, sacrificing her own comfort and sleep and money for someone who couldn't even thank her for it. That showed character. That showed Patricia was a good person even if she'd handled things wrong. Jennifer said we all make mistakes, that we all have parts of ourselves we keep hidden, that perfect honesty is an ideal no one actually achieves, that Patricia's secret was bigger than most, but that didn't make her a bad person, didn't mean our family was invalid, or that our shared history was worthless. It just meant things were more complicated than we'd known, and that was okay. That was being human. Sarah and Jennifer argued for an hour, both making good points, both seeing the situation from different angles. Patricia sat quietly through it all, crying occasionally, apologizing repeatedly, saying she understood both perspectives, that she'd hurt us all, that she was sorry, that she'd spend the rest of her life trying to make it right if we'd give her the chance. Eventually, Sarah turned to me, asked what I was going to do, whether I was going to marry Patricia once the divorce from Robert was final. whether I was going to stay in this relationship or walk away. She said whatever I decided, she'd support me, but she wanted to know, needed to know, so she could figure out how to move forward with her own relationship with Patricia. I told Sarah the truth, that I didn't know, that I was still processing, still trying to reconcile who I thought Patricia was with who she'd revealed herself to be, that some days I wanted to stay, wanted to make our relationship legal and move forward. Other days I wanted to leave, wanted to start over without all this complexity, that I was genuinely torn, genuinely uncertain, genuinely lost. Jennifer asked what I needed to decide, what would help me figure out what I wanted. I said I needed time, needed to keep talking to Patricia, keep understanding her choices, keep working through my feelings. I said the counseling would help, that having a professional guide us through this would make a difference, that I was committed to trying, to seeing if our relationship could survive this, but that I couldn't promise anything. Sarah said that was fair, that I deserved time to figure things out, that Patricia had kept secrets for 43 years. The least she could do was give me however long I needed to decide what to do with that information. Patricia nodded, said she'd wait as long as I needed, that she'd answer any question, do anything I asked. She just wanted a chance, wanted me to not give up on us without at least trying to work through this. I told her I wouldn't, that I was trying, that being here, having these conversations, seeing the counselor, was all part of trying, but that I couldn't guarantee what I'd decide. After the girls left, Patricia and I sat together on the couch. First time we'd been physically close since the revelation. We'd been sleeping in separate rooms, had been maintaining distance while we worked through everything, but last night we sat together, not touching, just near each other, existing in the same space. Patricia asked if I was glad I'd found out, if knowing the truth was better than the ignorance I'd lived in for 43 years. I thought about it carefully, told her I was glad, that as painful as this was, it was better to know, to understand what our relationship actually was, what Patricia had been dealing with, what the reality of our life together was rather than the illusion I'd been living in. But I also told her I was angry, deeply angry, that she'd stolen my ability to make informed choices, that for 43 years, I'd been operating with false information. I'd thought I was in a legal marriage, thought my wife was fully committed to me, thought we were sharing everything. None of that had been true, and that had affected every decision I'd made, every choice about how to spend our money and our time, every assumption about our future. I'd been making decisions based on lies, and that wasn't fair. Patricia said I was right, that she'd robbed me of agency, of the ability to choose what to do with full knowledge of the situation, that if she'd told me years ago, I could have decided whether to stay, whether to help with Robert, whether to legally marry her once the divorce was finalized. Instead, she'd made those choices for me, had decided I was better off not knowing, had taken away my right to decide for myself. She said that was the worst part of what she'd done. Not the caring for Robert, that was actually good, but the lying, the deception, the treating me like I couldn't handle the truth, like I needed to be protected from reality. That was patronizing, disrespectful, a fundamental violation of our partnership. She said she saw that now, wished she'd seen it sooner, wished she'd trusted me enough to tell me. I asked her what she'd expected would happen if she told me. What outcome had she been so afraid of that she'd maintained the lie for 43 years? Patricia said she'd been afraid I'd leave, that I'd see her as damaged goods, as someone too complicated, too burdened with past relationships and obligations. She said when we met, I'd seemed so straightforward, so uncomplicated. I'd never been married, never had serious relationships. I was starting fresh. She'd thought if I knew about Robert, about the failed divorce, about her complicated past, I'd walk away, find someone easier, someone without all her baggage. And then once we were together, once we had children, once we'd built a life, the stakes were even higher. Telling the truth would mean admitting she'd been lying from the beginning, would mean risking everything we'd built, would mean potentially destroying our family. So she'd kept lying, kept hoping the problem would resolve itself somehow, kept choosing short-term peace over long-term honesty. Patricia said she'd been a coward, that she'd let fear drive her choices, that she'd prioritized her own comfort over my right to know, that she'd been fundamentally selfish even while telling herself she was being selfless by caring for Robert. She said there was no excuse, no justification, just explanation. She'd done wrong, and she knew it. I appreciated her taking responsibility, not making excuses, not trying to minimize what she'd done, just acknowledging it. accepting that she'd hurt me, that she'd violated trust, that she'd built our relationship on a foundation of lies. That was something. Not enough to fix everything, but something. The counselor we're seeing starts next week. Patricia's made appointments for us, individual sessions for each of us, joint sessions together. The counselor specializes in couples dealing with major betrayals, infidelity, financial deception, lies that threaten to destroy long-term relationships. Patricia explained our situation. The counselor said it was unusual but not unprecedented, that she'd worked with couples in similar situations, that there was hope for rebuilding trust if we were both committed to the work. I don't know if I'm committed yet. I'm committed to trying, to showing up, to being honest about my feelings, but I don't know if I'm committed to staying, to making this work, to legally marrying Patricia and moving forward. That depends on so much, on whether trust can be rebuilt, whether I can forgive, whether I can see Patricia as my partner again, rather than as someone who deceived me for decades. Robert's condition is declining. The caregiver called Patricia yesterday, said he's been having more difficult moments, more confusion, more agitation. The doctor thinks he might only have a few months left. The Alzheimer's is progressing quickly now. Soon he'll require hospitalization. Eventually he'll die. Patricia asked if I wanted to visit him again, to see him before he gets worse, to maybe say goodbye to the man who's shaped so much of our life without me knowing. I said I'd think about it. I'm not sure what I'd say to Robert, what I'd feel looking at him, but maybe I should go. Maybe I need that closure, that acknowledgement of his existence, his impact on our family, his role in our story, even though he doesn't know he has one. The divorce papers should be filed this week. Patricia's lawyer has everything ready. Once they're submitted, it's a waiting game. Court approval, legal processes, all the bureaucracy of ending a marriage that should have ended 43 years ago. Patricia says once it's done, she'll feel free for the first time in decades. Free from the legal obligation. Free from the burden of being married to two people. Free to actually be with me in the way she'd always pretended to be. I told her freedom came with a cost, that she'd be free, but I'd be burdened with knowledge I can't unknow, that while she was shedding her secret, I was gaining one. Now I have to decide what to do with what I know, how to move forward, whether to stay or go. She gets relief. I get complexity. Patricia said that was fair, that she deserved to carry some burden, that she'd had 43 years of knowing while I had none. Now I had knowledge and choice. She had to live with whatever I decided. That was her consequence, her price for decades of deception. Our neighborhood knows something is wrong. Patricia and I are usually social, friendly with neighbors, attend community events, but for the past 2 weeks, we've been invisible. Haven't left the house except for necessities, haven't attended the weekly neighborhood coffee, haven't been walking together in the evenings like we usually do. People have noticed, have been calling, texting, asking if everything's okay. Patricia wants to tell them, says we should be honest, that hiding another secret would just compound the problem, that if we're going to rebuild trust, it needs to start with transparency, with not hiding things, with being open about our complicated situation even though it's embarrassing and difficult. I'm not sure. Part of me agrees, wants to be honest, wants to not add more secrets to the pile. But another part of me thinks our private life should stay private, that our neighbors don't need to know about Robert, about our invalid marriage, about Patricia's decades of deception, that it's our business, our family matter, not something for the whole neighborhood to know and gossip about. We haven't decided yet. That's another thing to discuss in counseling. How much to share? Who needs to know? Whether transparency means telling everyone everything, or whether some things can stay private while we work through them. I've been thinking about the break-in that started all this. The person who came through our back door in October, who violated our home, who prompted us to install security cameras. In a strange way, I should thank them. Thank whoever that person was for inadvertently revealing a much bigger violation, one that had been happening for years without me knowing. Without those cameras, I'd still be ignorant, still thinking Patricia and I had a simple, honest marriage, still sleeping through her nightly departures, still unaware of Robert Mitchell, still living in comfortable fiction. The break-in forced truth into the open, forced me to see what I'd been missing, forced our family to confront realities we'd all been avoiding in different ways. So maybe the break-in wasn't just a violation. Maybe it was also a gift, a painful one, an unwanted one, but a gift nonetheless. Truth usually is, even when it hurts, even when it destroys illusions, even when it forces difficult decisions and uncomfortable reckonings. I looked at the security footage one more time last night, the night I followed Patricia, watched her leave our driveway, knowing now where she was going, why she was going, what she was doing during those hours. Watched her return, come back into our house, back into our bedroom, back into bed next to me. Watched myself sleeping, completely unaware. That image haunts me. Me sleeping while Patricia lived this whole other life. Me trusting while she deceived. Me believing while she maintained elaborate lies. That's what hurts most. Not what Patricia did, but what I didn't know. The gap between reality and my perception of reality. The years of living in ignorance while thinking I understood everything. Then I deleted the footage. All of it, from October through last week. Every clip of Patricia leaving and returning. Every piece of evidence of her secret life. I don't need it anymore. Don't want it. The truth is known now. The recordings can't tell me anything I don't already understand. Keeping them would just be holding on to pain. Replaying betrayal. I'd rather let them go. Patricia and I have our first counseling session tomorrow. I'm nervous. Scared of what we'll discover. Scared of what I'll learn about myself. About what I really want. About whether our marriage, illegal as it was, is worth saving. Scared that counseling will show us we're too broken to fix. Or worse, that we're not broken enough to justify walking away. That we're stuck in some gray area where staying is hard, but leaving is harder. But I'm also hopeful. Hopeful that professional guidance will help us navigate this. Will give us tools to rebuild trust. Will show us whether there's a path forward or whether we need to acknowledge this is the end. Either way, I need to know. Need to understand what's possible. Need to make a decision based on reality rather than fear or hope or inertia. Patricia asked me this morning what I wanted, what outcome would make me happy, what would help me heal from this betrayal. I told her I wanted to understand, wanted to know why she'd made the choices she made. Not her surface explanations, but the deep reasons. The fears and beliefs and assumptions that led her to maintain such an elaborate deception for so long. I wanted to see into who she really was, not who I'd thought she was, who she actually was. And I wanted to know if the person she actually was could be someone I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, or whether the revelation of who she really was meant we were incompatible, meant our relationship had been based on false premises, meant staying together would be staying with an illusion. I needed to know what was real, what was possible, what our relationship actually was and could be. Patricia said that was fair, that she'd work to show me who she really was, to be completely honest for the first time in our relationship, to let me see all of her, not just the parts she'd thought I wanted to see. She said it was terrifying, being fully known, being fully seen, but that it was necessary, that our relationship couldn't survive without it, that hiding had destroyed us. Only transparency could rebuild us. I agreed. Told her I'd work to be open too. To be honest about my feelings even when they were harsh. Even when they hurt her. Even when they were unflattering to me. We'd both been living with comfortable lies. Me in ignorance. Her in deception. Now we needed uncomfortable truth. Full truth. Complete truth. Only then could we decide what to do. Did you like my story? Which country are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next story with love and respect.